You know, I wasn't always into power scaling, and I definitely wasn't into power scaling Miraculous Ladybug. There was a time where I was convinced Hebi Sasuke could blitz and one-shot Chad Blanc. I know, a crazy thing to hear me of all people say. But one day, I saw a lot of YouTube shorts comparing characters in a similar way to what you're currently seeing on screen from my second channel. And I got curious. So I decided to make one pitting two characters I talked about a lot at the time against each other. Ruby Rose and Ladybug. I did some research and I was surprised to see exactly how powerful Ladybug is. It was nowhere near where I currently scale her, but it was enough for her to win. Now, a lot of people didn't believe that, so I made a different full-length video that is currently outdated to talk about exactly how powerful she and Chat Noir are, and the rest is history. But there was one trend going on a lot at the time that I was cognizant of, but never really paid that much attention to. Demon Slayer versus Miraculous Ladybug. 2022 and 2023 was a time of putting Miraculous Ladybug against Demon Slayer to see who came out on top. And often, Miraculous got the short end of the stick. If you asked, a lot of people would tell you, with complete seriousness, that Tanjiro could defeat every character in this show in a fight at once. Now, you guys probably know me well enough to know that I disagree. Strongly. Miraculous has more than one scene where Galaxy has to be shown on screen so we can properly understand how powerful the characters are. Even if you remove the universal being that was introduced in the season 5 finale or the entire main power system of the show, it's still not close. There's a Superman XP in the show's version of New York that can fly to the moon and push it into the earth. But this video isn't really meant to compare current Miraculous and Demon Slayer. It's more meant to look back at the time these edits were being made and even beyond that and ask, was there ever a time Demon Slayer was more powerful than Miraculous? The oldest example of this take I found came out on the 23rd of July 2022. Demon Slayer has the advantage here because the manga finished in 2020. So at the time there was a pretty concrete understanding of what the verse could do. My initial plan was to compare both series at this time, but it quickly became apparent that that wasn't gonna help me at all. Going by the date, this would put Miraculous at the end of season 4. A lot of the feats that I kinda want to avoid would have happened by then. Stormy Weather 2 moving the Earth out of orbit, Star Train traveling to another galaxy, the entirety of Chat Blanc, they all remain intact. Damn, season 3 was a big bump for this show's scaling. Wait, the London special came out in 2020. Majestia moving the moon still counts. So, because I think it would be absolutely boring to just say Miraculous is stronger and basically repeat points I've already made in other videos, I've decided to do something new. We're going all the way back to season 1, and from there, we're gonna work our way down to figure out exactly at what point Miraculous began to outclass Demon Slayer. When can we reasonably say that Demon Slayer would lose in a verse versus verse fight, and when can we say that it truly stands no chance? Now, Miraculous is pretty underrated when it comes to power scaling, but if you average it out, Demon Slayer is even more underrated. Miraculous at least has its multiversal and conceptual elements. My point is that even the most fervent denial of Miraculous still has to concede that Chat Blanc could destroy multiple galaxies. And despite the fact that I still think that grossly undersells his power, I can't exactly say it's that underrated when Demon Slayer fans have to argue that the characters are in fact stronger than regular humans on Twitter. So let's go over Demon Slayer scaling. Demon Slayer has two major sides and power systems in its conflict: the demon slaying humans and the demons. Demons are the product of Kibutsuji Muzan, a human who was turned into a demon by a medical procedure gone horribly wrong, and he is thus the strongest demon. Demons have both incredible superhuman stats and blood demon arts, which are supernatural abilities formed from their blood and flesh. These range from spitting poison to cryokinesis, and they get stronger by eating people. On top of that, the demons have incredible regeneration and infinite stamina. But they do have a weakness: sunlight kills them. And connected to that, if you can cut their heads off with the solar infused Nichirin blades, they die. unless there's something they use to protect themselves. The most relevant demons are the upper moons, the 6 strongest demons who've climbed the ranks of power and been acknowledged by Muzan. The lower moons are the 6 next strongest, but Muzan killed them for being weaker than the Hashira, the strongest demon slayers. To combat these demons, the humans have total concentration breathing. By breathing in certain ways, they can increase the power in their bodies to accomplish superhuman feats, and even control their blood flow to mitigate bleeding and other injuries. It's important to note that the effects you see following their swords aren't real and have just been added for dramatic effect, even if that's hard to believe when you see them in action. Tanjiro isn't really producing water when he does his water breathing moves. The strongest character by far is Sugikuni Yorichi, who was frankly built different. He was able to defeat master swordsmen from the moment he first touched the sword and beat Muzan so badly that an inherent instinctual fear of him was ingrained in every demon afterwards. This guy beat Muzan so bad that despite the fact he was overwhelmingly more powerful than pretty much every other character in the story, he spent 400 years still hiding after the guy died. These breathing styles are all wielded by various demon slayers, though the most relevant ones are the Kamaboko squad, that is Tanjiro and his peers, and the Hashira. So, first things first. How strong are these characters? The best way to scale the verse is to scale Muzan in comparison to everyone else, and then scale Yorichi in comparison to Muzan. Considering Muzan in a highly weakened and poisoned state was still able to perform above a large majority of the cast, it's pretty clear he scales far above anything we see any other character do, unless your name's Yorichi. This includes the love Hashira Mitsuri, who was able to avoid lightning strikes sent at her by the final form of Upper Moon 4. This was before she got her mark, which greatly increased her physical ability. This is significant when you realize exactly how slow Mitsuri is compared to everyone else, even while being scaled to Mach 2200. She's still significantly slower compared to the likes of Gyome and Kokushibo, who were both far slower than the weakened Muzan, who, at full power, would scream and cry if Yorichi appeared in front of him again, and then explode into hundreds of pieces in the hopes that just a few of them could get away unscathed. Muzan also scales above everyone in AP and durability. Going off the anime, Upper 6 Gyutaro was able to decimate the entire entertainment district with an attack that's been scaled to large town level with the strongest application of his blood demon art. Upper 2 Doma, while suffering from a poison 700 times the dose expected to kill an average demon, in his panic was able to create an ice bodhisattva that scales to multi-city block level. Muzan himself, while poisoned, was able to create a shockwave that could be felt from so far away that it's been calced to scale as high as large town and even city level. This is debated when it comes to scaling because of the particularities of how it was portrayed, but it isn't inconsistent with what we've talked about so far. This would put everyone stronger than Gyutaro at large town levels, though it should be noted that the closer they are to him, the more this is really a ceiling than a consistent thing they can do. It also comfortably puts most of the verse that partook in the final arc in the massively hypersonic scale. Muzan and Yorichi would scale even higher than that, with city level being a pretty reasonable placement for them, possibly even approaching relativistic speeds depending on how you interpret the speed differences between unmarked pre-Hashira training Mitsuri and Yorichi. I also feel the need to bring up Nakime and her ability to create the Infinity Castle. It's not actually infinite, but it is essentially a giant pocket dimension she has complete control over. If she can get someone in it, she can essentially control their position and create obstacles and doors around them, as well as controlling their gravity. I will go over individual blood demon arts as they become more relevant. Muzan is not going to consume Nezuko during this fight, as that wouldn't really match the idea of everyone working together. The battle will take place at night anyway. Can't let the sun do all the work. Now, for Miraculous. Before we get to that though, let's play a game. Pause the video and tell me exactly where you think Miraculous will surpass Demon Slayer down in the comments below. Feel free to be as vague as saying mid season 2 or as specific as saying repost introduction. Miraculous is a brand new show we don't know much about. There are 2 teenagers who turn into animal themed superheroes who may or may not have luck based powers, and this guy in the shadows, Hawkmoth, who turns people who feel negative emotions into supervillains. These villains have special objects where these Akuma are stored, and if you break them, they lose their powers and turn back into regular people. Oh, and Hawkmoth will not be akumatizing anyone. That would be way too easy. Have you seen Sanemi? Now, Miraculous has a bunch of conflicting release orders. However, the point of this is figuring out when Miraculous surpasses Demon Slayer from the audience's point of view. Thus, I will be using the earliest release dates. The French release dates. So, we start off with Stormy Weather. Wow, it's already not looking good for our friends from Japan. The greatest feat in the first episode of Miraculous is Stormy Weather using a bolt of lightning to create a storm over Paris. Based on how far over the horizon the storm stretches, this is a baseline large town level feat she passively sustains and can actively control. The greatest statement in the episode is her plan to end summer throughout Paris. Even at the most conservative estimate of what she planned to do, assuming that she just wanted to lower the temperature of the country, this is a mountain level threat. At the most likely interpretation of her doing what she did to Paris to all of France, this can climb up to her passively sustaining a large island level storm. This is notable not just because it makes her scale high, but because to counter the demons' regeneration without sunlight or being able to cut their heads off with a Nichirin blade, she'd need to hit them hard enough to vaporize them so there's nothing for them to regenerate from. Now, you may think that this would be the end of the conversation, but it's not, for various reasons. For starters, information. There is not a whole lot we know about the show at this moment, and that ignorance is gonna carry Demon Slayer. We don't know exactly how the Butterfly Miraculous works or how it relates to the other Miraculous, but if you pay attention to the opening, we know it's in some way related to Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculous, and thus they are probably comparable, but we don't really know anything else. And if you don't scale Stormy's tornado attacks to that mountain/island level power or even the large town level one, the characters are only displaying building level physicality. Though it's notable that none of her displays or threats make them any more concerned than they already are. Combined with the fact that their highest speed scaling is just reacting to and avoiding lightning, you could argue that unmarked Mitsuri alone is enough for Ladybug and Shat. Going into the details of the calculation, this lightning dodge is actually almost 30% slower than hers. Ladybug's lucky charm does show it can help her with great battle strategies, but it lacks the feats or scaling to deal with a whole verse. Cataclysm only really has potential scaling to Stormy because of the implications of the opening, which isn't solid and at this point in the show is a one-time thing he has to be very careful about using. If you do scale their durability that high though, you just need someone who can bypass that, like Gyoko turning whatever he touches into a fish. Stormy herself poses a huge threat due to her ability to fly and throw lightning and freezing attacks. There are arguments for Stormy doing something large and crazy, like dropping a storm on their heads, but doing so has the potential to harm her teammates, and by the rules of this battle, she's not gonna do that. And with that restricted, her attacks at the moment are avoidable, and the Demon Slayer verse has options for attacking at range and getting her umbrella away from her, especially considering Tamayo can get the information out of the characters who are still on the ground using her magical aroma of daylight blood demon art, which works to make people tell her the truth. So, at episode 1, Demon Slayer comfortably takes the victory due to the speed advantage and only one character having confirmed AP to beat any of them. Wait, does this mean Demon Slayer gets soloed by episode 1 Stormy Weather if she gets serious immediately? No. She's still slow, and with pocket dimensions like the Swamp Demon's Blood Demon art and the Infinity Castle, the demons can avoid the destruction and, unless she destroys all of Japan, they'll be able to regroup at a distance and plan a sneak attack.
Next trick.
The bubbler changes quite a bit, and yet not much. With a stream of bubbles, he's able to target and capture Paris's entire adult population. He threatened to send a bunch of teenagers to where he sent them, and later when he does do that, he says that they're all heading into space. When Ladybug and Shat get sent into the air, they go very high and yet are unable to see any of the adults that were sent flying earlier. This is a casual small city level feat. Power wise, this doesn't really mean much unless you assume the stream of bubbles he attacks the heroes with is of a similar quality to all of these bubbles, and even then, the way they defend against them doesn't really scale them that high. But it does mean that the Miraculous verse now has yet another character whose total output is greater than most of the Demon Slayer verse can do, and he can create bubbles that can target a group of people with extreme accuracy. Bubbler didn't know where every adult in Paris was, but he still caught them anyway. This changes little because most of the demons whose names you know can probably get out of this, as the bubbles are only portrayed as too tough for the currently building level, maybe city block level Ladybug and Shat to break out of with their raw strength. But they could capture weaker characters, which is significant because a lot of the lower scale demons have hacks that would be very problematic for the Miraculous characters. For example, the Flute Demon, a character from a side story most of you probably have never heard of, who can disrupt the nervous systems of anyone who hears his song. He is weaker than Lower Moon's, and Lower Moon 1, post Muzan Blood Infusion, only scales to like city block level if we're being generous. With this power, Bubbler can capture the weaker members of the cast who would need to be rescued by stronger people constantly to keep them in play. Now, this is possible at the moment, but as the scale for Miraculous gets higher, more and more of these characters are gonna find themselves just going to space. Also, Bubbler can fly, which means he can also avoid a lot of the characters on the ground and being sent into the Infinity Castle by Nakime. While we still don't know much about the show's power system, with these two examples, I think it's safe to assume that most of the villains Ladybug and Shat would be fighting are at least consistently on a greater level of power than most of the Demon Slayer verse. This is because their power is still all coming from a single source, Hawkmoth and the Butterfly Miraculous. Of course, going by that, if you scale Bubbler's power to be around Stormy Weather's island level statement, this fight's actually really close to being over. Even divided among all his bubbles, he would still be able to make 1,000 that could easily capture Yoriichi, let alone every other character. Next up is Pharaoh. He can access a range of abilities based on Egyptian gods, from time-slowing bubbles to super strength, but the real kicker is the power of Anubis, which is the first hack's ability that can one-shot people in the show, turning anyone it hits into an obedient zombie. However, it lacks speed scaling. There is an inclination to compare any form of I-beams to laser vision with potential light speed scaling, but I don't do that without a reason to believe that that's what's happening. Lady Wi-Fi and Timebreaker also have one-hit KO powers, but they're still too slow. Lady Wi-Fi can teleport through phones, but that's gonna be hard to take advantage of when the cell phone hasn't been invented yet from the perspective of all of her opponents. Timebreaker's time traveling would at best let her warn the characters of ways they get beaten earlier, but it's likely she loses before she can do that too many times because, once again, too slow, probably not durable enough. Timebreaker does state she gets faster by absorbing people, but moving beyond the Mitsuri tier would just bring her to characters who are much faster and more dangerous, and we don't have any proof that she can get fast enough to avoid them. Also, the Infinity Castle and its many shifting buildings and all that would just make skating a lot harder for her. The biggest contribution Timebreaker actually gives Miraculous is insight into the nature of the powers the characters have. It shows that more abstract abilities like time travel and temporal existence erasure are possible, and that Ladybug can undo both. Like, before this episode you could make the argument that no one was dying, but this is the first time we see what is surely death get undone. Mr. Pigeon, however, does add a new factor to the fight. With Pigeon constructs, not only can he fly, he can lift other characters in the air on platforms. This would give the Miraculous characters a massive advantage in height, as not many Demon Slayer characters can fly. Also, Nakime will no longer be able to drop them into the Infinity Castle unless she can make doors on the backs of a flock of birds, which, you know what, I don't believe is possible. This adds Lady Wi-Fi to the list of ranged characters who can rain their powers down on the battlefield and severely reduces Demon Slayer's options. Unfortunately, Muzan is still fast enough to get around all that, and given his control of his body, I can fully believe he could grow wings and fly up there to fight everyone if he wants. And his entire body is poisonous, so he can get past durability if he's smart enough to get that poison in his opponents. If Illustrator shows that the hero's defense spinning can block buzzsaws and gives a greater display of Ladybug's enhanced skills. Also, if Illustrator himself could probably erase every weapon on the Demon Slayer side, though it seems he can't affect living beings. Going down the list, the next notable episode is Dark Cupid. His hate arrows have the first hack's ability that turn people to your side while keeping their minds and abilities intact, turning anyone he hits against their allies. This is notable because it's the first opportunity Miraculous characters have to learn what demons are from one of the controlled people, and specifically what their weaknesses are. The Nichirin blades the Slayers have, which they can take and use for themselves, and sunlight. Now, it's entirely possible that this creates a massive shift in the fight. Stormy Weather's power allows her to create weather phenomena from her umbrella. If that includes sunlight, the demons besides Nezuko are pretty much cooked, but that may be too strong an assumption. And Yorichi remains a problem, even if the Demon Slayer side loses most of their hacks because of this idea. But at this point, the fight begins to get more fair as more villains with more unique powers are added to the mix. However, I don't believe that they turned the tide quite yet. Dark Blade gives us this image of Ladybug catching a plane, a train, and protecting people from meteors with her yo-yo. This is too vague to really be scaled, but I just want to put it out there. The Mime is where the verse gets a much needed boost. There's a whole scene that exists just so the new supervillain can flex his powers and speed. He uses an invisible sword to cut up several posters of someone he's angry at. He does all the swings and then sheaths his hypothetical sword before the posters even begin falling apart, shredding them. I counted at least 24 slashes per poster, all from several meters away. This would be the first speed feat in the series that's much faster than Mitsuri's lightning dodging. Just doing it to one poster would make him twice as fast. 4 would make him 8 times faster. But then, I can only ask, who do you think is 8 times faster than unmarked Mitsuri? Whatever your answer is, they're the new problem. The Mime gets into a lot of physical confrontations with the heroes, which is notable because he also has a town level feat of slicing the Eiffel Tower in half like this. You would think his invisible constructs would be a major turning point in favor of the Miraculous characters, but they're not that complicated to figure out, and the Demon Slayers have Yushiro, whose blindfold blood demon art lets him see hidden things and show them to others. You know, if he isn't currently in space. Which actually becomes a lot more likely with the Mime raising the speed scaling the way he does, so many of the people who could free him from the bubble are being occupied by other strong fighters. If you want to allow the gamer into the fight with his complete mech from the start, he has access to a massive drill, and scaling to the bubbler and Stormy Weather, it becomes a massive source of damage that could devastate a lot of characters. Even without that scaling, his massive drill would still be at least town level. The pigeons wouldn't be able to carry him, but I doubt Nakime would be foolish enough to bring a giant into the Infinity Castle. With this, Demon Slayer finally starts to sweat. Though it doesn't lose quite yet. It still has the speed advantage, and if they're smart about it, can land hacks abilities on everyone else. Episode 19 though, is where things really start to swing in Miraculous's favor. It's the introduction of Reflector, a mirror-themed villain who can make people into copies of herself, causing them to lose their powers. The reason this is notable is because this is the first character to use an attack that can be reasonably compared to light, with the script even referring to what she shoots as rays, giving the Miraculous verse its first solid relativistic scaling. All of a sudden, the speed difference is now in Miraculous's favor, and the villains I've talked about so far become serious problems because they show relativity to the heroes. Giving Stormy Weather relativistic scaling would probably make her untouchable to everyone in the verse. Pixelator in episode 23 with his camera flash based ability just makes the relativistic scaling that much more solid if you don't think Reflector was good enough. Ladybug is moving at least half the speed of light when she dodges his attacks. For comparison, the absolute best scaling I could get for Yoriichi via chain scaling gets him to about 10% the speed of light. And with that, the advantage is now solidly on Miraculous' side, between Dark Cupid turning them against each other, Pharaoh and Dark Blade turning anyone who gets close to them into minions, and Pixelator and Bubbler being able to capture people. Even discounting the possibility of hitting hard enough to truly vaporize their opponent, Miraculous now has a devastating win con with Timebreaker, who can delete anyone she touches on a temporal level. No amount of regeneration is fixing that. And within the stretch between episodes 19 and 23, there are other additions to bring up. Guitar Villain has Shad take multiple attacks from Guitar Villain, which might be the third example of an attack from one of these villains solidly hitting the heroes and not being able to do damage. Stoneheart gets included, and his power is getting bigger every time he takes a hit. Chat Noir does the biggest act of destruction he's done all series with a cataclysm to Pixelator's pocket dimension that is, bare minimum, mountain level. At this point, I think I can confidently say that no matter how much you want to be conservative in scaling Miraculous as a verse, they have very solidly surpassed Demon Slayer. Do any of them win solo though? Ladybug and Shad have time limits that make their powers kinda useless going up against the whole verse, and they only scale to town level in AP without them. They're fast, but there's more room for them to make mistakes. Various villains like Timebreaker do have potential for a solo run, but I can think of things that keep them from having 100% guarantees. I mean, Stormy does if she's serious, but there's something really funny I want to bring up. It's very timely that we've just gotten to episode 25, introducing Princess Fragrance, whose power is a perfume she creates that makes everyone who sniffs it obey her. That's it. She can make a large cloud of perfume around her, and anyone who breathes it in becomes her servant, and she can fly by blasting her perfume to increase the spread and avoid being attacked by others. Even if you want to stretch that the demons would be immune because of their poison immunity, this would turn all the humans against them, including Yoriichi, and that just ends the story right there. Her only weakness here would be that fire attacks could ignite the perfume and burn it all up. And I mean like actual fire, of which Demon Slayer has 3 characters that could do anything about it. Nezuko's Burning Blood, which requires her to be injured first and also only works on demons, which might not translate to Akuma, and the heat generated by lightning attacks from Zohakuten and Kaigaku. And the thing is, I don't think these 20th century dumbasses are gonna figure that out in time. So, when did Miraculous surpass Demon Slayer? At least, with the most conservative assumptions, episode 19, when Reflector brought in the relativistic scaling, on February 21st, 2016. 6 days after the first chapter of Demon Slayer came out. It has never been close. Shout out to my patrons, A and Skyman. So, what do you think? Did I give Demon Slayer too much leeway? Have I overstated the power of Miraculous? Should I do more of this style of power scaling? Tell me in the comments below, and while you're at it, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Thank you, and good day.